For many years, tariffs were allowed to be used against us by our uncaring and unwise politicians. And we had it in our budget for most of the history of the country until 1913 when we got the stupid income tax. Trump found that there was a national emergency, and he took action under the law as he's allowed to do and imposed tariffs. And IEEPA's language does not contain the additional limits on which the majority's holding relies. So they're reading it very narrowly, right? You can only do these types of tariffs if we like them. President Trump says the tariffs are still in effect, and that is true because the Court of Appeals from the Federal Circuit extended the deadline on this thing, and we're very certain that Trump will be appealing this. But we're going to go through the decision. It was a big fat one. You can see it's here, 127 pages. I've got some details on exactly what this was, and we got a mind map over here that we can take a look at to break down this massive decision. But I also want to share with you who is on the court and who makes up this decision, because you can see here in this case, Trump battle versus the VOS selections tariffs case, you can see this is how the decision was, basically. Majority of the decision were blues, okay? It was a 7-4 decision, and so the majority was 6 Democrats, 1 Republican for the 7. The dissent was 2-2, okay? So the dissent is even more bipartisan than the majority, and I think this is the correct answer. And the judge who actually wrote this decision in the dissent is an Obama judge, and he did a great job explaining how the majority is just perverting the law. Like, the law says the president has the power to do this, and they say, well, but they didn't mean that. Well, the law says this, but they didn't mean that. And so we'll go through it. The other person who didn't vote is a very actual interesting case. Her name is Pauline Newman, and she's this elderly, allegedly woman who they've sidelined. She is suspended right now. She's a Republican. She's totally suspended. She's sued. She says, I'm competent. I can do my job. But the Chief Justice has sidelined her, and so she's in a suspended status. So she can't take part in these decisions right now. So that's also an interesting thing too. And she sued and sued and sued, saying, I should be able to partake. But the Chief Judge just said, you're too old. Sorry, you can't participate. So the judges on the bench in this decision were appointed by Bush, Clinton, and you can see this big slot is Obama. Almost half the judges came from Obama. 18% of them came from Biden. George W. had 18%. H.W. had 9.1%. Clinton had 9.1%. Trump didn't appoint a single judge on this entire court. All other judges. Now, we've got the decision. We'll go through it and explain exactly what's going on. But here is what Trump said. All tariffs are still in effect. Today, a highly partisan appeals court incorrectly said that our tariffs should be removed. But they know the United States of America will win in the end. If these tariffs ever went away, it would be a total disaster for our country. It would make us financially weak, and we have to be strong. The USA will no longer tolerate enormous trade deficits and unfair tariffs and non-tariff trade barriers imposed by other countries, friend or foe, that undermine our manufacturers, our farmers, and everyone else. If allowed to stand, this decision would literally destroy the United States of America. At the start of this Labor Day weekend, we should all remember that tariffs are the best tool we have to help our workers and support companies that produce great made-in-America products. For many years, tariffs were allowed to be used against us by our uncaring and unwise politicians. And we had it in our budget for most of the history of the country until 1913 when we got the stupid income tax. Now, with the help of the United States Supreme Court, we will use them to the benefit of our nation and make America rich, strong, and powerful again. Thank you for your attention to this matter. No, thank you, sir, for the post. We appreciate it. So here is the reaction from Pam Bondi. Pam said, Trump found that there was a national emergency, and he took action under the law as he's allowed to do and imposed tariffs. The judges of the Federal Circuit are interfering with the president's vital and constitutionally central role in foreign policy. This decision is wrong, undermines the United States on the world stage. The DOJ will appeal this decision and continue to fight to restore the president's lawful authority. So this is an Obama judge, Toronto, joined with the dissenting judges. He says, all right, listen, before us is this trade case. 5 private businesses, a bunch of states are here. They're all suing the president. And this court, the majority, today affirms the holding on jurisdiction, standing, and unlawfulness, and vacates the injunction. Now, we agree with the majority's decision on jurisdiction and standing, meaning they could be here in this case, and on the need for reconsideration of the remedy if the tariffs are unlawful. But we disagree with the majority's conclusion that they are illegal. We conclude that the plaintiffs have not justified judgment in their favor on either the law, statutory grounds, or on constitutional grounds. Saying about the statutory authority, they have not shown on summary judgment that either group of tariffs fails to meet the preconditions under the law. Okay, and so you're going to hear this conversation a lot, that liberals are saying it all over X right now. Well, the Constitution says that Congress can set the tariffs, which is true. It's in the Article 1, Section 8, whole list of powers that Congress has. And that is enumerated power, right, to control tariffs. But Congress is so pathetic that they delegate these things out to the executive branch because they don't want to manage manage tariffs. That's a nightmare for them. They can't even manage their lives. So they delegated all of that out to the president. And you might disagree with that delegation, and you might say that we should adhere more towards the Constitution, but the law is what the law is, and Congress passed it, and now they can't say, well, we did give you the tariff power, but not this tariff power. Like, we didn't think you'd actually use it. That's what the law says. And they're saying the same thing. It says, now they're saying that this sets the presidential authority, and the president has created this now to respond to extraordinary threats. Now, the majority does not disagree. Instead, the majority concludes that these particular tariffs at issue are not among the tools that are available to regulate the importation of goods. We think otherwise. The IEEPA's language, as confirmed by its history, authorizes tariffs to regulate importation, a conclusion the majority does not squarely reject, but that Judge Cunningham and those who join her opinion do. There were other decisions or other opinions from the other judges, like, well, I just want to say these other things, kind of a concurring opinion. And IEEPA's language does not contain the additional limits on which the majority's holding relies. So they're reading it very narrowly, right? You can only do these types of tariffs if we like them. Now, this law embodies an eyes-open congressional grant. Congress, when they wrote it, they granted broad emergency authority in this foreign affairs realm because that is the purview of the president, which unsurprisingly extends beyond authorities available under non-emergency laws. And Congress confirmed this, that they understood the scope of this authority to particularly demanding procedure requirements for keeping Congress informed, right? So he can do it, but he's got to notify Congress, which is appropriate. And if Congress doesn't like it, then they can impeach the president for that or push back on it, and they can have a tension between the two branches, which is what we're supposed to have. We don't want a very nice, cozy relationship between all the three branches at all, or the fourth branches that they create for us. The goal is to have the elite structures fighting against each other. Now, Congress has delegated a lot of that over to the executive branch. You could say rightfully or wrongfully, but they did that, and they did a lot of it. And so that's what the law says currently. And contrary to their reason for invalidating the tariffs, the reciprocal tariffs, this is not displaced by some other law. Like, you can't say that law overrides this law. Nor does the IEEPA, the trade law, contain the exclusion of using these authorities as leverage. And finally, in their major questions doctrine does not call for a different conclusion. And about constitutionality, we also conclude that the IEEPA's authorization of presidential action in this realm is not an unconstitutional delegation of legislative authority. Okay, Congress can delegate that stuff. Okay, fine. They pass a statute, send it over there, executive can enforce it. If that's their prerogative, they can do it, which have upheld broad grants of authority, including tariffing authority in this foreign affairs related area, right? And there's a distinction here between delegating to the executive, which is a legitimate entity, and delegating to the Federal Reserve, which is an illegitimate entity, or to any of these other non-tucked in entities in our federal government. They got to be tucked in nice and tight under the executive branch. Otherwise, they're kind of their own amorphous branch in our government. And that is the last thing that we want, because it creates that perverted bureaucracy that we're all living through. And so for those reasons, on the present state of governing law, we would reverse their summary judgment and remand for further proceedings. And so we therefore respectfully dissent.